What is going on, guys? Welcome to the 314 Hockey Show, your news and rumors outlet, all things hockey. I've been trying to launch some hockey stuff for a while over the last couple years and finally decided, hey, it's the new year and this is the kind of best time to do it. We're going to be covering all things NHL, and then we're also going to be taking special twist looking at the St. Louis Blues, as I am from St. Louis, with special Blues centric content, episodes, things like that. But I figured there was no better way for me to launch the YouTube channel, the 314 Hockey Show, than to talk about the Olympic rosters. They got announced today that we will be going to kind of going in depth on with the Olympic rosters. We're going to go over the U.S. and Canadian rosters here today, as each roster isn't finalized. There's still several weeks before the Olympic break in mid-February. Injuries could happen, suspensions, things like that could take place. However, the set roster of 25 players, the initial roster, is launched by each team. So we're going to go over all of the players that made the roster, give my thoughts on the roster, break down some snubs, and then kind of go over what I think some potential line combinations could be. We're going to start with the United States. And you take a look at this roster. Let's see, I'm going to go. Yeah, we're going to go here. You take a look at this forward roster. It's very similar to the Four Nations. You've got the Chucks. You've got Eichel. You've got Matthews, Gensel, Husey. JT Miller made the team again. Kyle Connor, Dylan Larkin, Vinny Trocheck. Clayton Keller and Tage Thompson both made the roster. Chris Kreider was left off this year, and with the Olympics getting an extra person than Four Nations, he was the only omission off the forward group that made last year's Four Nations. That saw the U.S. lose in the gold medal first place game to Team Canada, who we'll talk about. We're going to skip the omissions to the very end. Just looking at this Team USA roster, there are a few surprise names on the list. The first is being a pair of New York Rangers. JT Miller and Vincent Trocheck making the roster after making it in Four Nations. I understand it, especially with Mike Sullivan and Chris Drury are both high-level decision makers with Team USA, Drury being assistant GM for Team USA with GM Bill Guerin, and Mike Sullivan being the head coach of the team. However, when you take a look at their play this season, as well as the Rangers' play as a whole, those two making the team is definitely an eye-scratcher. Obviously, Eichel, Tkachuk, and the Tkachuks, as well as Austin Matthews, were announced beforehand as part of the Signature Six that were announced earlier last year that were going to the Olympics. None of those are a surprise. Matthews has been playing very poorly this year, as well as the rest of the Toronto Maple Leafs. So where they decide to play him is definitely going to be intriguing. However, there was no way he was going to be left off of this team. As for Matthew Tkachuk, he should be getting ready to get skating here soon for the Florida Panthers. I have no doubt he's going to be ready for the Olympics. There's no way he's going to miss the Olympics. This really became an embodiment of the Tkachuk team last year at Four Nations. They brought the edge. They brought the swagger. They also brought a lot of skill, physicality, and personality to the U.S. team that for a while we could argue was JT Miller's team over the last couple times that they've been playing with men's league for the U.S. and things like that. So really, I think the Chucks and Eichel, that line will be staying together. What they do on the second line is going to be interesting. I would assume Matthews and Hughes are going to be on it. I've got Gensel right now penciled in. He played very well in the Four Nations. He seems to always elevate his game quite a bit when it comes to international play. And then that's where you can slide Boldy in on the third line. And what they decide to do there is very interesting. I currently have penciled in the starting lineup JT Miller, Brock Nelson, and Vincent Trocheck. But I could easily see a world where Clayton Keller and Tage Thompson, two first-timers, take some of their spots on the roster. Especially Tage Thompson. He's become one of the best players in the NHL, one of the better goal scorers. He could play center. He could play wing. I think him on the third line with Boldy and Connor would be a lot of fun. and then maybe you slide Miller down to that fourth line center role where he is more of a checking line guy, and then Larkin and Keller become your kind of alternates, swapping in for injury or change of pace, things like that. There's obviously some very glaring snubs on this team that we will get into in depth, but I want to talk about Jason Robertson. Jason Robertson being a snub is an absolute crime. He is tied for second for goals with the Americans, I believe. And he has had 100 points twice. And his down year, I believe it was twice for Robertson, his down year was a point per game. He has been electric this year. And when you look at the reason why Team USA lost the Four Nations, which is the basis of the Four Nations, was really a preview for what these teams would look like at the Olympics, right? It was kind of an embodiment of what the team could potentially look like. The U.S. didn't lose that game against Canada because they couldn't check, they couldn't defend. They couldn't get a goal in overtime on Jordan Binnington. And I believe this team, and when we talk about the other omissions, we'll get into why they didn't make it and why it makes sense that they didn't make it in a minute. But Jason Robertson, the notion that he is some small offense-only forward is a little bit insane. He is 6'3", 6'4", 6'2". His defensive metrics are much improved this year, and he has that goal-scoring mentality. I mean, when you look at this roster, I don't see a ton of true goal scorers on this roster. Austin Matthews is a true goal scorer. He's having a very down year this year, and he didn't play overly great in the Four Nations. He's a true goal scorer regardless of how his play is this year. Kyle Connor, who was scratched multiple times in the Four Nations tournament, he's a true goal scorer. Matthew Boldy is a true goal scorer. Tage Thompson, who we'll see if where and when he enters the lineup, is a true goal scorer. But outside of that, Eichel and the Tkachuks can score, but it's not their calling card. Eichel is a playmaker, and the Tkachuks play more of a physical, get-to-the-net brand of hockey. Gensel is a true goal scorer, but he is diminishing in play as he gets older. I'm not saying he's not a bad player at all, but he's going to become more of a little bit of one-dimensional player as he ages, right? So he's a little bit of one of the older players on this roster. You weren't going to take him off the team, but then you look at these guys that were on the bubble, JT Miller, Brock Nelson, Vincent Trocheck, and we'll get into it on Team Canada side too. There are these fourth-line penalty-killing, big-body style guys, which is fine, but when you're lacking some true elite goal scoring compared to Team Canada with McDavid's, McKinnon's, those kinds of talent, it's a head-scratching move to leave Jason Robertson off the team. A couple other things they could do is that if they wanted to rotate Connor again, Clayton Keller is someone that can slide into that spot. If they wanted to scratch Connor, if he gets off to a slow start, Keller can immediately be a middle six goal-scoring kind of forward for you. Tage Thompson, I would 100% have in this lineup. I don't know where they're going to put him. Personally, I would probably, based on his play this year, I'd probably have him centering that second line with Hughes and Gensel. I understand you're not going to move Austin Matthews down to a bottom six kind of role. So Tage Thompson can play that third line center role. But if it was up to me with these guys in this roster at the forward group, I would have the Tkachuks flanking Eichel. Gensel, Matthews, Hughes is what I would do is fine. That third line, I would make it Boldy, Thompson, and Kyle Connor. And then the fourth line, I would go with Clayton Keller, JT Miller, and Dylan Larkin, with Miller or Larkin playing the wing. And I would have Nelson and Trocheck be your scratches. I think Trocheck plays a specific role on the team and Nelson plays a specific role on the team. They're probably not going to get scratched. They're going to be playing that face-off fourth line grindy penalty kill kind of role, which is fine. But when you've got both Tkachuk and his brother coming back from injury, Brady and his brother Matthew coming back from injury, who also play that penalty killing rugged style play of hockey, I feel like you should have opted for more goal scoring here if you were the United States at the forward group. Taking a look at the defensive unit and the goaltenders, not a ton of surprises. Let me see if I go this way. No, we don't want to do that. Let's go this way. Taking a look at the goaltending. Jesus, Joshua. Taking a look at the goaltending, pretty obvious three: Hellebuck, Ottinger, and Swayman. There was no debate, I don't think, between those three. I think they were the best three to choose. Who your role was starting? Hellebuck proved in Four Nations that he could step up in the big games. He might not be good in the playoffs, but regular season and in Four Nations, he was excellent. I think you roll with him and Ottinger as your starter and backup, and then Swayman comes in and plays if there's an injury or both tend to struggle. You know, I was listening to the pundits on Sportsnet talk about if you get to your third goalie in the Olympics, you're screwed. And we'll get into why they were saying that here in a minute. But I don't think that's the case for the U.S. I think all three of these guys can go ahead and take over games and control games and win games because of their goaltending. It is the biggest strength by far out of any team in the tournament is the U.S.'s goaltending, especially when you compare it to the Canada's goaltending. It is without a doubt the strength. And even when with Sweden and Finland, who have good goaltending too, and Sweden's got a really good defense core. The U.S.'s goaltending is by far the strongest group out of any group in the Olympics, and that includes Canadian forwards, and we'll go into why here in a minute. But looking at the defense, it's pretty much standard. Quinn Hughes, Brock Faber, who play together similar to the Canadian top pair of Makar and Taves. Zach Werenski, who was awesome and has really become electrifying, become the third best defenseman in all of hockey, behind Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes. Charlie McAvoy coming back healthy. That top four is elite. And then you've got Slavin and Sanderson as your third pair, with Hannafin and Seth Jones as your extras. The one glaring omission is Adam Fox. Similarly, Jason Robertson being left off, Adam Fox being left off is an absolute crime. And he's battled some injury this year. He was on the ice for the final game-winning goal in the Four Nations. Like, I understand the logic, but you look at the right side, which Sanderson's a lefty. One of Sanderson, Hannafin, or Jones is going to have to play on their offhand, or Slavin for that matter. Is going to have to play on their offhand on the right side. Because your two extra defensemen that you brought were lefties. Hannafin and Jones, both left-handed defensemen. So you're already lacking an extra right-handed D if someone were to go down or get hurt. And I currently, again, I have Sanderson and Slavin. You can interchange them on either side if you want. Faber is on this team because he's playing with Quinn Hughes. Bill Guerin's the GM. Faber probably, if they didn't acquire Quinn Hughes, Faber would probably be their seventh or eighth defenseman. And you'd probably see a Seth Jones or Noah Hannafin in the starting lineup. But Faber's going to have that chemistry with Quinn Hughes playing together for almost 2 months by the time the Olympics comes together. They're going to have chemistry. It's going to make a lot of sense. And then Werenski and McAvoy, I think, are the best defensive pairing. Non-teammate defensive pairing probably in the group, including the Canadian defense, which we'll get into here in a little bit. Adam Fox not being on this team, especially over Hannafin, who's not been playing well this year. Hannafin's not a great defensive defenseman. He's known for his offense, and he's got like 12 or 13 points this year in 30 games. He's not playing great, and he didn't look overly great when he was playing in the Four Nation tournament either. Seth Jones makes sense if you needed a power play guy. Like when we go to Team Canada and the omissions that they've got, the omission made sense because of their strength. Seth Jones, I believe, being added to this team, he will only be playing if one of Hughes or Werenski gets hurt and they need a power play quarterback. And even then, Jake Sanderson can lead a power play. Charlie McAvoy can lead a power play. Brock Faber can lead a power play. You didn't need Seth Jones. I would have added Jones over Hannafin. Excuse me. Personally, I think Jones is deserving and playing better hockey than Noah Hannafin is. But not having Adam Fox on this team is a true crime. Again, looking at the goaltenders, there's no real big omissions here at goaltending. Those were the three that were going to make the roster. All three are playing at an incredible level and really have over the last years. I know Swayman kind of had a down year last year, but Boston as a whole was not very good and battled a ton of injuries that sold a bunch of pieces at the deadline. Hellebuck and Otter are your 1A, 1B both. Again, Hellebuck battling some injury this year. Winnipeg is playing terrible. It has nothing to do with Hellebuck at all. You look at the same percentage Hellebuck has versus what the Jets goaltenders and what the Jets look like without Hellebuck. It's night and day. And then Jake Ottinger's playing some lights out hockey this year. So that's kind of the overall thoughts on the defenseman and goaltending. We'll go over and we take a look at the snubs. Jason Robertson and Adam Fox are the two big ones. And you look at the other forwards, there's a couple forwards I could put on here. I put Cole Caulfield and Alex Tuch. Alex DeBrincat is another one. The U.S. only brought 5 of their top 10 goal scorers on the team. Robertson, Caulfield, and DeBrincat are all in the top 10 and did not get put on the team. Caulfield and DeBrincat, I understand more than Robertson because they are more one-dimensional than Robertson is. They are smaller. It's going to be a smaller ice rink. They're smaller bodies. They're less physical. There's going to be less space for them to be able to get out in transition and get out in space to make plays. And it's going to be a little bit more of a physical brand of hockey with there being some European style play with half the refs being from the NHL and half being from Europe. It makes sense for me why Caulfield and DeBrincat didn't make it. Alex Tuch is the one. And similarly in that vein, Matthew Knies as well. Alex Tuch is the one that is a little bit of a head scratcher to me because if you wanted someone that embodied what Canada did with Tom Wilson, Brandon Hagel, guys that are physical branded, could play on the PK, but also could play up and down the lineup and score goals and make plays. Alex Tuch is kind of the U.S.'s version of that. I think him making it over a Nelson or a Trocheck would have made a lot of sense. And then obviously we got into talking about Jason Robertson. If you look at the forwards here for the U.S., going back to the screen, if you were to take off Nelson and Trocheck, or Miller and Trocheck, or Miller and Nelson, and you add Jason Robertson and Alex Tuch in place of them, I believe that this team looks a lot more complete. I would even Larkin plays center, and again, that's the difficult part. Is both Robertson and Tuch play wing. You're looking at these guys. Nelson can play center. Trocheck can play center. Miller is a center. Tage Thompson can play center. So like the guys that they would be replacing are few and far between. Like it would be Clayton Keller, it would be Kyle Connor, unless you wanted to get rid of some of that center versatility like a Nelson and Trocheck. But to me, if you wanted guys that could check on the fourth line and still make an impact, if you were to take Trocheck and Nelson off this team, you have Larkin center the fourth line with Miller and Tuch, and then you have Thompson on the third line with a Jason Robertson and a Kyle Connor, or a Jason Robertson and a Matt Boldy. And then your extras being, a Clayton Keller and one of Boldy, Connor, or Larkin. I think that this team would have looked a lot more complete. It would have had a lot more goal-scoring prowess, and it would have had a lot more depth. Like if you look at the forward core, we'll go back up here to a minute. The forward core, out of the bottom 6, the only person I think you can move up and down the lineup, if you needed to, would be your 2 wings on the third line in Boldy and Kyle Connor, which don't give you positional flexibility. So you gave yourself positional flexibility with Nelson, Trocheck, and Miller to move around your bottom 6 where they already were at anyways. So it was a head-scratching move to me. Jason Robertson would have immediately, the way that he's playing this year, what would have happened is he probably would have been on the second line with Gensel, and you'd have Hughes center it, and then Matthews would center your third line with Boldy and Kyle Connor. And then you have Miller on your fourth line centering it or playing the wing with however you want to compare it. And then Nelson and Trocheck are off the team. Nelson and Trocheck, both veterans. I understand keeping them on the team. They're going to have roles to play. They're going to be fourth line PK physical style bodies. But this team really lacks elite goal scoring prowess, especially with the way that Austin Matthews is playing. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Matthew Nyes and Alex DeBrincat are the other two that we can touch on here at the forward group. Kind of similar to Cole Caulfield. They play a very one-dimensional brand of hockey right now, especially Nyes. He's just so young. He's still developing his game quite a bit. DeBrincat and Caulfield, again, are electric goal scorers, but they're small, don't play a lot of physical, and it's going to be a smaller rink with probably a little bit more physical rules of hockey. So it's not really surprising. If you were to have put them on the team, you probably would have taken them instead of a Kyle Connor or a Matt Boldy or a Clayton Keller, because those guys kind of play a similar branded style of hockey. And you can make the argument that Caulfield and DeBrincat probably should have made it over Clayton Keller or Kyle Connor this year based on their play, and I wouldn't argue with you. But Keller and Connor are both a little bit bigger than Caulfield and DeBrincat, so it does make sense. As far as the defense, there's really not a ton of surprises. Obviously, Adam Fox is the big one. He should have been on the team. But after Adam Fox, the other guys that were on the bubble, Hannafin and Jones, got in. And Lane Hudson is kind of just super young. He'll be there in 4 years at the next Olympics. He'll probably be at the Four Nations in 2 years. And then John Carlson, I want to mention only because if the Olympics would have happened, we were NHL players in 2018 and 2022, he probably not only would have been on the team, he probably would have been the captain of the team. Obviously, they didn't happen for NHL players, and he got left off. And now, here in 2026, he's at the back end of his career. He's a little bit older. I don't ever think he had a legit shot at making the roster, but I did want to note him, even though he's not on the list, because I think it's worthy of noting that he should have had at least one big Olympic run. I know he was on the roster in 14, but he was super young and didn't play a lot. He would have been, 24, 23, around that when he was on that team. So it sucks for him, but his play did not warrant him being on the team moving forward. So that's kind of the breakdown of the United States. Again, I think they have two, unlike Canada, where I can understand and see why some of the omissions were made. The U.S. have two really big ones in Jason Robertson and Adam Fox, and I would even add Alex Tuch as a pretty significant one because of the roles that Tuch can play, and I think he can play them better than some of the players that were on the team and added. But that's kind of my take on the U.S. I think they've got the second best roster. If they're going to win, it's going to be because of their defense and their goaltending, just like they won it when they beat Canada on the Four Nations group stage games. So that's kind of my take on the U.S. Let's go ahead and let's jump into Team Canada, and the star power is ridiculous on Team Canada. So obviously you've got McDavid, you've got McKinnon, you've got Crosby, right? They were on the list when they first announced the team. And then you've got a lot of guys that played on Four Nations: Hagel, Cirelli, Braden Point, Mark Stone, Sam Reinhart, Mitch Marner. Couple new faces, and a lot of the faces happen to be changed on the forward group. So they added Nick Suzuki, Bo Horvat, Tom Wilson, and Macklin Celebrini. Couple names left off: Travis Konechny not on the team, Seth Jarvis not on the team. Couple things. The first piece, and I heard Sportsnet talk about this, and I completely agree, you have to figure out who's playing with Connor McDavid. And we'll get into it when we talk about my omissions. Mitch Marner's not having a great year in Vegas this year. I think he's a logical choice to play with McDavid, and Sam Reinhart to give him that big-bodied electric goal scorer, I think makes sense. Because to me, I think you have to put Celebrini, Crosby, and McKinnon together. I don't care who plays center. It probably would be Sid. But you can I don't think it's going to be Macklin. I think him on the wing makes way more sense there. But it could be McKinnon. Would make a ton of sense on the second line. Celebrini making this roster at 19 is absolutely unbelievable. It is absolutely unbelievable. What this kid is doing at 19 years old, not only for the San Jose Sharks, but for the NHL, is terrific. His two-way game has improved a ton. His goal scoring when he's and playmaking ability, especially on a Sharks team that does not have a ton of top-end talent, he's willing them into a wild card race, is terrific. This kid is an absolute bona fide stud. And when general manager Doug Armstrong was talking about it, you could see the joy on his face talking about Macklin Celebrini. He's going to be a stud. Not only is he going to be on this roster this year and likely playing in a top 6 role, he's probably looking at 3 more Olympics after this if he continues this trajectory. I mean, he's 19 years old. The next Olympics that he'll have will be in 4 years. He'll be 23, then he'll be 27, then he'll be 33, then he'll be 37. I don't think he'll be playing Olympic hockey when he's 37, but he's got a lot of Olympic hockey ahead of him. So that's really cool to see. Braden Point made the roster on the initial 6 that were announced alongside McDavid, McKinnon, and Crosby. He's a stud. He's not having the greatest of year. I think he's only got like 8 or 9 goals this year, but he's picked up 3 or 4 of those goals over the last week or two. He's starting to find his game. He kind of battled some nagging injuries early in the season. I think he's a great addition to the team. And I want to talk about Nick Suzuki, who's got like a just shy of 100 points in the calendar year of 2025. He's got like 94, 96, something like that. He's been electric. He's been absolutely awesome. I thought he was a snub on the original Four Nations team. I thought him and Robert Thomas were really kind of battling for that last center spot, and then it didn't go to either one of them. Nick Suzuki's taken the ball and ran with it over the last 12 months, and I have him listed as a scratch right now, and we'll talk about why. I don't expect that to be the case, whether it's with injury or lineup maneuvering or something else. He should be in their lineup. He should be ready to play, and they should find ways to use him. Brad Marchand and Mark Stone, 2 older guys that have kind of faced some up and down injuries over the last couple seasons. Both are playing at an electric pace right now. Marchand's at a point per game. Mark Stone has only played in, I think, 20-some games, and he's got 30 points. They weren't going to be left off this team, not only because of their offensive ability, but because their two-way ability. Mark Stone's one of the best defensive wingers in all of hockey. He wasn't going to be left off this team. And then I want to talk about the bottom line. So Seth Jarvis was the big omission left off the team that was on the Four Nations team, and he looked like he was replaced with Nick Suzuki. And then Sam Bennett was the other omission that looks like he was replaced by Tom Wilson. Tom Wilson plays a role, and that's why him, Cirelli, and Hagel are listed in the lineup, and Suzuki is listed as a scratch, at least on my makeup lines right now, because they're going to be a physical, penalty-killing line. Cirelli and Hagel, 2 of the best penalty killers in hockey, especially for head coach John Cooper, who is the head coach of the Lightning and a head coach of Team Canada. And then Tom Wilson plays a physical brand of hockey, which, unlike the United States, Canada does not have in their top 6. I don't expect McKinnon to be going out and hitting people a ton. McKinnon's a big physical force and will win games with speed. He'll win puck battles, but he's not going to go and start beating people up on the boards. Mitch Marner is not that way either. McDavid's not that way either, and Celebrini is not. So Team Canada had to have identity in their bottom 6, like a Hagel, like a Wilson, like a Cirelli, like a Stone, that can do that. So that makes a lot of sense for them to bring those guys. Sam Bennett was amazing for that team in the Four Nations and was also amazing for the Florida Panthers when they won back-to-back cups. His omission is glaring, and we'll talk about it, but he's not having the greatest year hockey-wise for the Panthers this season. And Wilson's playing really, really good. I don't think this was a situation where Bennett was playing bad, therefore we need to replace him. I think Tom Wilson is just playing that good of hockey right now that you had to have him on the team. Bo Horvat's kind of an interesting one. Listening to Doug Armstrong talk, it sounded like he was brought on for his face-off ability. But I'm looking at this roster, and again, like, where are you going to play him? You're not going to like you've got centers with McDavid, Celebrini, Crosby, McKinnon, Braden Point. Like I don't know, like, and then if you're taking Cirelli out of the lineup to play Bo Horvat, then why would you bring Cirelli at all? Because he plays a very specific role on your team, and that is to be your top penalty killing unit, which is why Brandon Hagel I don't think is coming out of the lineup either. So if you were to look at this, like I don't think, similarly to the U.S., when we look at the U.S., I don't see a world where Nelson, Miller, and Trocheck come out of the lineup because I think that's eventually what your fourth line is going to look like and what your kind of checking line is going to be. I feel very similarly with Hagel, Cirelli, and Wilson. Like that's going to be your fourth checking line, their penalty killers, like that kind of style hockey. So I don't see you taking them out of the lineup because you brought them to play a specific role. You didn't bring them to put up a bunch of points and a bunch of goals. You brought them to be a shutdown, physical kind of presence. Bo Horvat doesn't play that way. So you'd be substituting Bo Horvat for who? Again, Point's not playing great this year, but he was part of your initial six announced. So I don't see them taking him out the lineup. Mark Stone and Brad Marchand, I guess if they get banged up and hurt, you could move Point to the wing and have Horvat center your third line. It's very weird. Like Suzuki can find a role anywhere. Like I expect him to be in the lineup somewhere. Horvat's kind of an interesting one. If you brought him to specifically take faceoffs, there's not really a major, like you're not taking out McDavid, Crosby, McKinnon, or Celebrini. I doubt you're taking out Point. I guess you could, but so like the role for Horvat's very, very specific. When we look at the omissions of guys that offer a little bit more flexibility, it is very, very interesting to me that Horvat made this team. He's having a really good year. He's had a really good year last year too for the Islanders. It's interesting to me that he was one of the guys that was brought. Moving on to the defensemen and the goaltending, this is where the big conversation kind of is. And we'll start with defense. It's the same 8 that they brought to Four Nations. You got Makar and Taves, Morrissey, Theodore, Parayko, Sanheim, Drew Doughty, Thomas Harley. It makes sense. Okay. Now, the names that are missing here, Evan Bouchard's a big one. Matthew Schaefer's a big one. We'll get into kind of both of them. And it's the way that Canada wants to play. And I talked about Adam Fox and how there was a role for him. Excuse me. There was a role for him on Team USA because they lacked right-handed defensemen. Evan Bouchard, there wasn't really a role for him on this team. The only role that he would have had is if Makar and Morrissey got hurt, because Bouchard would have essentially been brought on to be an offensive zone, power play quarterback type of defenseman, which you already have on this team with Makar and Morrissey, and Theodore can also run a power play too. So you're really limiting, and so can Taves for that matter. So you're really limiting his ability. You're not going to take Parayko off this team, one, because Armstrong's a general manager, and two, because he is a super big body that's right in front of the net. And Sanheim's kind of the same way. Sanheim's playing better than Parayko is this year. Parayko's not having the greatest of years, but as we get into talking about the goaltending, the Blues, and I've watched every single game, I cover the team, the Blues are not a very good hockey team this year. So it makes sense to not punish him too bad, especially when I thought Parayko actually had a pretty decent Four Nations. I know people on the Canadian side didn't think he was that good. I thought he played exactly what his role needed to be. Drew Doughty, again, I personally wouldn't have brought him based off of play. That would have been my Bouchard spot. You bring him because of what he means to Canada, his veteran leadership and presence, the amount of times he's played for Canada before, the pride he has. Like, that's why you bring him. It kind of makes sense. You bring him on his merit and his resume. Based on his play this year, probably wouldn't have been on the team. Thomas Harley's, again, fine. That would have been another one that I would have been like, all right, Matthew Schaefer, Evan Bouchard, like that would have been kind of that spot. Because to me, if you look at this team, if you were to go Makar, Taves, Morrissey, Schaefer, Parayko, Theodore, and then you scratch a Sanheim or a Doughty, I don't think there's any harm in that. Or if you wanted to take Sanheim off and you scratch a Harley and a Doughty or a Bouchard, that kind of, that's fine. The issue is you weren't going to bring Schaefer to be a 7th or 8th defenseman. If you were bringing Schaefer, you were going to play him. Similarly to Celebrini, you don't bring Celebrini just to have him be a bottom 6 forward because he's 19 years old and you bring him to play him in his roles. And Schaefer, if he wasn't playing nearly as well, I think it'd be a different conversation for a couple things. The Islanders and Patrick Waugh have given him every opportunity to try to earn a spot in Team Canada. He's their top minute defenseman. He's playing power play PK. He's averaging about 24 minutes a night, and he's coming off a season where he only played in 9 games. Regardless, he hadn't played in very many games this draft year because of the injury. He's come back. He's looked terrific. I understand leaving him off. I do. But if you were to find a role for that dynamic player, I think that you should have done it. But overall, the defense, fine. You look at the goaltending. Logan Thompson's playing awesome this year. Darcy Kemper's been really, really good this year, really, really solid. And there's Jordan Binnington, who, as a St. Louis Blues fan and someone that covers the team, has not been good this year. However, his numbers are completely misleading because of just how bad the team has been in front of him. And that's not just the defense core, it's the forward core too. I think he's faced, the second or third most high danger shots in the league. And the Blues have the worst goal differential by far in the National Hockey League. So some of that on Binnington, absolutely. Binnington lays in a couple cupcakes. They shouldn't be going in. Most goalies do. Binnington's happen in bunches. But there is no goaltender outside of maybe Andrei Vasilevsky that plays better in big moments and big games than Jordan Binnington. We saw it at the Four Nations last year, where the saves that he made when he had an actually good team in front of him, and his play was fantastic. And then you saw it again in the playoff series last year against the Winnipeg Jets, where we know how bad Hellebuyck is in the playoffs. Binnington not only played better than him, he dominated Connor Hellebuyck. And if it wasn't for the Blues breaking down defensive coverage with 1.6 seconds left, leaving a wide open Cole Perfetti for a 1T opportunity, he would have beaten Connor Hellebuyck in 7 games in the playoffs last year. His play has been bad this year. If this was just based on his play, he would not be on this team this year, and you'd be looking at an Aiden Hill, Sam Montembeault, one of the Blackwoods, or Wedgwood from Colorado. That would be what you were looking at. But his reputation in big games, his merit with Team Canada in the past, and the fact that Doug Armstrong's general manager, him being on this team makes sense. I'm going to also give people in Canada the harsh reality. He's probably going to be your day one start. I know everyone's going to look at this group of 3 goaltenders, and they're going to be, well, he's your third goaltender because of the way Thompson and Kemper are playing. And I'm not saying that Thompson isn't playing better than Binnington. I'm not saying that Kemper isn't playing better than Binnington. And especially last night, 2 nights ago, as of this recording, after Binnington was announced to Team Canada, he immediately let in 6 goals against the Colorado Avalanche. Well, 5 goals, I guess. One was, he let in 6 goals. That's not a good look. But the team in front of him is not good. You've got an actual Olympic all-star team in front of him. He's probably going to be your game one starter, at least to start the Olympics, based on merit alone. You're probably looking at him and Thompson as your 1 and 2, and then Kemper being your emergency third kind of deal. Binnington lights it up in big games. Could I be wrong and he gets the start and then he looks terrible? Sure. But I think based on his track record in big moments, big games, and big tournaments that matter, I feel like people not only analyzing Team Canada, but people that are fans of Team Canada should be giving him a little bit more benefit of the doubt than he's getting. So that's kind of my take on it. He's not been playing well this year. Hofer's been playing way better than him, and neither of which have been that good because the Blues have just been terrible this year. So we move on to the snubs, and that's why another name's not on here. So the first glaring name that's on here is obviously Sam Bennett and Seth Jarvis. Both were on the Four Nations team. Jarvis probably makes the team if he's not injured. I see a world where he makes it over a Bo Horvat or Brandon Hagel. If he was healthy. He wasn't healthy, but the team also in the Four Nations, he was on the team, and they didn't utilize him hardly at all. Like, if you're going to use Seth Jarvis, it's going to be in a top six, middle six role where he's in a goal scoring ability because he's not a great defender. You're not using him in a fourth line shutdown role. You're not going to ask him to check. Like, you're going to use him to score goals. Canada's got a bunch of that. I kind of see why he was left off, and the injury doesn't help his case. Bennett basically was Bennett for Tom Wilson to me is the even swap. They both play similar roles. I expect Bennett to be one of the first calls if there's an injury. Like when Horvat got hurt, it seems like he's going to be fine. He'll be out for like a week or two. When he got hurt, I immediately think it will Sam Bennett could get the call here. Connor Bedard is very similar to Seth Jarvis. He probably would have made the team if he, if he hadn't gotten hurt. But unlike Celebrini, and I'm not saying that Bedard's not a good two-way player, but compared to Celebrini, Bedard's two-way game is not nearly as good as Celebrini's. And with the role that you'd ask Bedard to play, you've got several guys on the team that already play that role. If this was Team USA, he'd probably be your second-line center because the team needs goal scoring and playmaking. Canada doesn't lack that nearly as much as the U.S. does. Bedard being off the team again. The name that's not on this list I want to talk about is Robert Thomas. Again, I kind of mentioned him with Nick Suzuki. They were kind of on the bubble for Four Nations, and I would have thought Thomas would have made the Four Nations team last year if he hadn't gotten hurt and missed 2 to 3 weeks right when the Four Nations roster being decided. This year, he's just not playing well enough. And I've got a whole Blues breakdown video getting ready to come out this week talking about Robert Thomas as a whole. If Robert Thomas was playing on another team that wasn't the St. Louis Blues, he'd probably have an additional 10 to 15 points and probably be in conversation to make the team. He's playing on the Blues. They're not very good this year. He's got 30 points in like 33 games. And he missed a couple games, and he has got so many points taken away because his teammates can't finish. Again, I urge people that are actually covering the sport to actually watch hockey of these teams instead of just looking at the underlying numbers. Because you look at Bennington's underlying numbers, they're bad. How about watch the games and see why they're bad? Same thing with Robert Thomas. Well, he's only got 29 points and he's a minus so-and-so. Watch the games and watch what he's doing versus other players not. And again, I'm not going to get into this whole tangent. Even if Thomas was playing at the level he's capable of, I wouldn't have had him make this team because I think Suzuki's just playing that much better than he is. And then even out of the snubs, he probably would have been last on the snubs list with Bennett, Bedard, Jarvis. But I wanted his name mentioned on here because I think he's someone that was kind of on that next level tier bracket of Team Canada. I put Zach Hyman on the snub list only because, as I mentioned, finding the person to play with Connor McDavid is going to be Canada's biggest challenge. Him and Zach Hyman's chemistry is unmatched, and it would have made sense to put him on this team just to play him with McDavid, and you could have put him on the team over a Bo Horvat, over a Brandon Hagel, over a Brad Marchand or a Mark Stone if you wanted to. Again, I understand why they didn't, but I think that chemistry factor got overlooked a little bit. And as far as defense, we talked about Evan Bouchard and Matthew Schaefer. Bouchard would have been put on here as a power play guy. He makes a ton of mistakes on the defensive end and turns the puck over, but in a very, very reduced role, I think he would have been an asset to Canada. And Schaefer, again, if Canada wasn't going for this big-bodied, I don't want to say physical, but big-bodied, long-rangey kind of group on defense, Schaefer would have made a ton of sense. But again, to fully maximize him, you would have had to carve out a specific role for him, which you already have in guys like Theodore, Makar, and Morrissey. So that's kind of an overall take on the Olympic roster. Sweden and Finland announced their rosters too. I'll do that in the next episode of the 314 Hockey Show. But let me know what you guys think about the Olympic rosters as a whole down in the comments down below. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe. Blues breakdown with Josh Berg coming later this week, talking about Robert Thomas and Jordan Kyrou potentially being the reasons why the Blues are near the bottom of the league. And let me know what else you guys want to hear me talk about. We got full World Junior recap coverage coming at the end of the World Junior tournament here as well. So make sure you guys stay tuned for that. And until the next time, I am Josh Berg, and this has been the 314.